scheduling, and then perhaps doing some of the training online, but then assessing them through the database, through an assessment system such as Twitch. So there has been a large transformation in the last 3 to 4 years, 5 years.
In terms of data, Steve, how do you collect data? How do you think it's valuable from Quich? What helps you to collect data and helps you in the...
Well, the nice thing about the electronic systems is that, and I'll talk about Quich in particular, is that, because I use that system, is that the Quich system complies with data integrity, because only people with a password and their log on can enter the system. So the system knows it is Grania Oates that's on the system, and there's a record of that. And so when that person gets into the system and they start doing things, the system tracks their activity. And so a product like Quich complies with the data integrity expectations of the industry, that the records that are generated are authentic and real and can be relied upon. The other nice thing about Quich is that you can easily schedule what I call modules of training. So perhaps if an employee has to go through a presentation and then 10 SOPs, then all of that can be scheduled through the Quich scheduling system. And then it sends an email out to the individual to say, hey, you're in this class, or you need to do this. You need to read this SOP, or you need to attend a session. And then when you're done, you've got X days to do the quiz. And then the quiz automatically assesses whether they are passing or failing. So it's a package that just puts you all in one.
Lovely. Greenwich joining us, Steve. So let's see if she's got another questions. Just bear with me a minute. Apologies about that.
So, Grundy, you're back.
The person you are...
No, she's running out of reception, but I think we cover everything that we're about to share with our attendees today. Is anything else that you would like to share, Steve, about your experience with Quich? Or
Sure.
Actually, we have Gronia back.
I am back. So I'm so sorry about that. The system overheated and everything shut down on me. So I'm so sorry, Steve. You were in full flight telling us about competencies there. And my computer was not very competent in that particular situation. So if I may, Steve, if I can come back to you with them. So we talked there about the demonstrated competencies and what that means, and you went through the 3 levels.
Yeah.
And I wonder then, in terms of, you talked about assessment and so on, and in terms of like a tool like Quich, can you explain to us or discuss its value proposition from your perspective?
Okay, so maybe I can do this by example. Recently, because of COVID, we can't travel. And we have clients in Hong Kong at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and they invited us to run a series of lectures for them, which we did, and we chose Quich to manage the students. And the way we did this was each student got a log on, so they're registered on the system. We sent them, before we ran each module, we sent them resources, a document to read or a regulation to prime themselves with. We then did the presentation. And then after the presentation, we activated their assessment. I think we did 25 questions from memory. So we posed, some questions were easy just to make them feel good, and some questions were difficult to try and challenge whether they actually understood the content. And so each student, then we gave them 7 days to go through the assessment on Quitch. And the nice thing was we could track their progress. So if a student wasn't engaging with the system, we knew. If a student was engaging, we knew. We also knew at the question level whether the students were having trouble with a particular question, which may have meant we worded the question poorly, or may have meant it was too difficult, or it could have meant we didn't cover it properly in the training. So all of that was electronically monitored, and so we could get reports on individual students and reports on the group performance. We found that was really valuable because it kind of validated that the group we were working with were diligent and pretty smart. Most of them did very well. And they could see from their group outputs that they were managing the course well. So it gave a 360-degree feedback to them. So we felt that Quitch was really useful in this space.
So, and that was, Steve, yeah, so in summary, that was in terms of that real-time feedback to you as the educator on, who might have been struggling or at risk, but also in terms of the content. What were those areas of difficulty for the cohort?
Yes, it pretty quickly identified those students that were struggling. So the Chinese university could then go to those students and say, what extra support do you need? We could link with them directly to talk about anything they didn't understand, even down at the individual question level. And so that provided pretty rapid feedback about how they were going and how we were going. In terms of the way we structured the course and the way we assessed.
I think that's a really good term to use. Rapid feedback is exactly right. It gives you all of that in real time and allows you then to adjust accordingly, as you say. And
well, the thing about training is that you can get people in a room or on a webinar or online, and the trainer has little knowledge of whether they're absorbing what you're telling them. And so you kind of need rapid feedback systems to say, oh, so-and-so was actually not awake or not absorbing or distracted. But the majority were. And so that feedback is really useful.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And that's exactly, as you know, one of the reasons, which was before the pandemic at all. And we have to, as you say, when people are, especially when you're training them remotely, it's very, very difficult to know, what's going on or who's actually engaged, or are they, off watching something on the telly or doing something else entirely. So if you're not able to test and assess them, then we really don't have that understanding. So that's great that it was so valuable in that way. And then I guess, Steve, I think you've been using Quitch for probably a couple of years at this point.
Yeah, we have.
Yes. And I wondered, what was it that made you decide to implement Quitch for your learners in this field?
Well, there are several reasons. Back in a previous life, I was in charge of what was then called e-learning, and we were using a commercial package to manage the students. It was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. It was okay, but it didn't provide this instantaneous feedback and the oversight of students' behaviour and performance. It was always much later on did you discover a student had dropped off. And so when we, in my current consultancy, when we got into the training space again, I didn't want that sort of system. I wanted a system that actually was very interactive and was as much as possible real life. And so when I looked at several systems and I saw your system and I tested it, I decided that it was A, really easy to use, which I thought was good. B, it gave the almost instant feedback about if something was going off track. And also, I don't know if you want me to mention this, but it was quite price competitive per student. The commercial packages out there are pretty cost prohibitive once you get volumes, but your product was, within budgets for our clients. So there was a couple of 2 or 3 drivers on this, but and I'm glad we chose it because it's been really good.
Fantastic. And Steve, on that, what has been the feedback actually from learners themselves in using Quitch? What has been the sense?
We've had no negative feedback at all. Most of the students are used to using these electronic systems, so for them it's not novel. We've had some of the curriculum advisors have given us very good feedback, saying it's a really useful tool, but the students themselves, they don't really tell you too much about their experience. But the course curriculum advisors have given us good feedback, saying it's pretty good. So we've had good feedback, but more from the advisors than the students.
And we could see too, Steve, in the educator portal itself, you had a very high level of engagement. You had, I think it was over 90% when I looked up the students actually engaged with it. Did that surprise you, or do you feel that it's something students are kind of expecting as part of the training these days?
Look, if we did face-to-face and paper-based assessments, if we got 50% engagement, I'd be happy. Now, when you go to web-based presentations or remote presentations, it's really difficult to tell whether a student's on the other end is asleep, scrolling their phone, reading a book, or paying attention. And so through the Quitch system, we're able to identify whether people are actually paying attention. And I think that's useful, and they would know that we were monitoring this as well. So that helps them.
Yeah, but that you're aware of it as well. And Steve, on that, what's the persona of a CBE Quitch learner? So your Centre for Biopharmaceutical Excellence. What's the kind of the persona of the learner?
Oh, okay, it's a good question. There is a couple of different cohorts. We have one cohort that are industry employees that are required to do this training or are nominated to do this training. So they actually work within industry. But recently we've had cohorts that are university graduate based. So they're about to enter the pharmaceutical industry and that they need some practical hands-on training about what's going to confront them when they get out into industry. And they're also very interested in certificates because certificates help them get employment. And so we kind of have 2 cohorts. One group are industry based and the other group is university based.
Okay.
The system works for both.
Yeah. And Steve, I'm just conscious that somebody may have some questions for us, so we should probably just pause there for a moment until we continue on and see if there are any questions.
Fire away.
Let's see if we got any there. And I think I asked people to hold their questions until the end, but I thought I'd just perhaps give people a moment there. So no questions just yet. Okay, so that's okay. So we'll continue on and maybe come back to the chat towards the end and see if there's any further questions then. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about, Steve, was, so you talked earlier, about competency and how that can be demonstrated and so on. But what particular areas of compliance and training, and I know you mentioned GMP, good manufacturing, do CBE deliver and specifically what through Quitch? So what are you kind of testing your learners' knowledge on, I guess?
Okay, I'll go back to my example, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, partly because I can't really talk about clients' detail, but that course was a 12-module program, and the purpose of that course was to equip these final year graduates in medical sciences to go into industry. And it was based around manufacture of biological products. Now, the reason for this is really interesting because in Hong Kong, in this example, most of the pharmaceutical industry makes tablets, capsules, cough syrup, your generic over-the-counter products that you see in pharmacies. However, the Hong Kong government have determined that they want a biological manufacturing base in Hong Kong with advanced therapies, new biologics, and so forth, which I think is a really brilliant idea. And so for them, for the government, they said, well, we need to train people to equip them to move into those industries in the future. And so they encouraged the Chinese University of Hong Kong to activate this course for their students to equip them. And so the course, and they wanted industry trainers rather than university lecturers who've had hands-on experience to run a practical course for these students. And so the driver is interesting. And so what we did, we prepared a 12-module program, which looked at quality assurance, quality control, manufacturing practices, manufacture of biologics, registration of biological products, how that whole system works. So we've now done 2 programs here, and we've been invited to do a 3rd one next year.
Right.
So, interesting driver.
Yeah. Very interesting, actually. So that's a great sign, Steve, that obviously it's being, so well delivered and accepted that you're being invited back to do more. And I guess that comes raises another question for me about, delivering training and so on. And since the pandemic hit, and obviously we've all had to, move to online or remote learning, if you like, have you found that Which is more valuable in that situation? Like, did you feel that some of your clients was looking specifically for you to demonstrate that you would be able to assess them remotely, I guess?
Look, it's been really useful because clearly a lot of the future is, in the foreseeable future, is going to be remote learning. And we are going to be on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. And this is just a fact of life. We can't travel to Asia where we used to be able to. And so when you're doing remote learning, it can be remote in the sense that you're not connected to the student. And so a product like which gives you sort of instantaneous feedback or very quick feedback, enables you to understand whether the students are engaged. And they know this as well, so that encourages them to be more engaged, because they can see, yep, as a group they're learning, as individuals they're learning, or they're falling behind. And so, it's quite a valuable tool, particularly in a remote training environment. It does help a lot.
Yeah, that's great. And Steve, I guess then, as a kind of wrap-up question, if you like, and I'll hand it back to you in a few moments to see what else you would like to add. Sure. But I guess my question is around, in terms of other organisations in your industry, what advice would you give to them, those that are currently considering implementing a Quitch-like tool, if you like, or Quitch? What would your advice be?
For those that are working on paper or working on Excel spreadsheet right now, my advice is stop it, because it's not the future. And when you look at, like I said, the array of SOPs versus employees, and you get to 20,000 really quickly, and then on top of that you've got version control and updates and regular retraining, that whole dimension does not lend itself to anything other than an electronic system. And so even for small companies now, these systems are affordable, and they take a lot of pressure out of getting compliant records. And so whether somebody went with Quitch or another product, either way they go, it does help quite a lot to simplify not only the training but also the record keeping, because those records in our industry are going to be inspected by auditors on a regular basis, and paper records just don't cut it.
And I think too, Steve, I come back often in my head what you were explaining earlier about how quickly you can get to those 20,000 items, as you say, with 200 standard operating procedures and 100 staff. And a lot of pharmaceutical companies have a lot more than 200 SOPs and a lot more than 100 employees. So I guess the other thing that strikes me there is that ability to be able to scale that assessment and training. I guess how important that is.
So one of the major companies in Australia has 1,000 employees and 5,000 procedures. So if you do that math pretty quickly, that's a big system.
Yeah, that is a very big system.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I'm going to wrap it up there. And we have a comment here from somebody who says, thanks, Steve, for your great insights. What do you think Quitch should do to attract more corporates to jump at the opportunity to use it to improve retention and understanding?
Look, I think if corporates know they have to go to electronic systems, whether it be in the compliance space or non-compliance space, one of the first things they're going to do is look for value proposition. And value proposition is really about which electronic systems are out there. And in the value proposition is the questions I'd be asking is, A, price. What do I get for my dollar per student? Secondly, interface with the users. How easy is it for a user to use that system? Because if the system is not user-friendly, people will not use it. So that's the second thing. And the third thing I think is in the pharma industry is, how compliant is it? Will it deliver the compliance records that are going to be critical during an inspection? And so if you look at value and you say, what am I using now? And I've got maybe in a big company, I've got 10 people in training. I've got a room full of paper. The value proposition is what I call a bit of a no-brainer, really. And then it gets down to features of systems versus price and support. So
that's right. I think support is an important part of that as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for that question. It's a very good question, actually.
Very good.
Steve, I might hand back to you for a moment and say, was there anything you'd like to say that we didn't cover today?
No, not really. But I mean, I think if you look at I can only talk about the pharma industry. I've been in that my whole life. Everything is moving towards electronic records and electronic signatures and electronic systems. And even small companies now are moving towards this. So, in 10 years' time, maybe we'll have paperless manufacturing, paperless industry. And these systems are now very sophisticated and they're really useful and they add a lot of value. So when I audit companies, I'm always interested in the electronic strategies and whether those documents and records can be secured and are they reliable? My general conclusion is it's much more reliable than paper.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's probably no question about that today, but it's still, change can take a long time, can't it?
Oh, well, companies change when they feel a need, you got to give them the value proposition.
And I think too, the pandemic has shown us that we can change a lot quicker than we potentially thought we could. It was one thing I think it's shown us all, universities, pharmaceutical companies, retailers, whatever it might be. I think we've all had to change very quickly and, majority of people have managed quite well.
Well, it's been amazing how the vaccine industry has responded to this pandemic. I wrote a paper on this recently that the quickest vaccine development had been 4 to 5 years previously, and that was very quick. Generally, it's about 10. And, there's been a miraculous piece of science that have got it done in a year. This is a game changer for regulators in industry and patients. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's exactly right. There's no question about that. So, Steve, I'm going to say a huge thank you for joining us today. It's been really, really valuable to hear your insights, and thanks for taking the time out. And I know everyone has enjoyed it. And we also, of course, we have recorded the session, so we'll be able to share that, because I know some people had let us know that they wouldn't be available to attend today at the time that we'd allocated. So the good thing is we can share that with them afterwards. Also, thank you to the people who attended the session today. And we will, of course, Raf and I will be in touch and we will offer you a copy of the webinar as well, so you can refer back to that. And Steve, is it okay if anyone reaches out if they have any further questions for you?
Absolutely fine, no problem at all. Yeah.
Great. Steve, thank you so much. It's great to see you. And good luck with everything. And keep all this great work up in the pharmaceutical industry. It's fantastic to hear what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the time.